All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to my studio. My name is Bill Platz, and I'm pleased to see you again. For any of you who joined me in my workshop in June, welcome back. For those of you who are new to us for this series, welcome, and I hope you can join us throughout August on these Thursday evening life drawing sessions. Now, first things first, I would like to thank Shannon for doing that acknowledgement, and I would also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet tonight, and to elders past, present, and future, and to pay my respects to any First Nations peoples that might be joining us here tonight. Now, we've got something really special in store for you tonight, because this is the first in a series of life drawing workshops in which we are going to step chronologically through time. We're going to start with this first one called Yesterday's Bodies, and we're going to root it in the 19th century, and we're going to really think about the way that academic life drawing was mediated, the way that it was taught, the way that it was practiced, and its legacy that goes on till now, 200 years later. In the second session coming up next week, we're going to go on to sudden bodies. We're going to talk about movement and kinesthetics and gesture, and move ourselves more into the 20th century modernist drawing and post-war drawing. And then in the final session in a couple of weeks' time, Unruly Bodies, we're going to talk about contemporary life drawing and the way the body is dealt with in life drawing practice and pedagogy's teaching of life drawing now. So before we get on to any of that, thank you, Shannon, for introducing our two outstanding models tonight. This is Rachel and this is Atticus. And Rachel and Atticus are going to be with us throughout this whole series. And I apologize for walking back and forth in front of them as I speak here. They're going to be with us throughout this series and doing a number of different types of poses for us. Now, we are going to make this as user-friendly as possible for you, not only tonight in the live stream, but as Shannon said, these are going to get posted to the QAGOMA YouTube channel. So you will be able to go back and review this content and work through it again. And because of that, we're going to make this life drawing session also very YouTube-friendly, as you'll see. All right, now, I'd also like to join Shannon and the QAGOMA team in thanking HSBC for sponsoring this virtual events workshop. And again, giving me the opportunity to be here and to share this, this information with you tonight. We're going to do a lot of drawing tonight. I'm going to take you through an introduction at the beginning. I'm going to show you some drawings from the QAGOMA collection and talk a little bit about those drawings and how they relate to academic life drawing of the 19th century. And then we're going to get right into it, and we're going to start drawing. And I'm going to be drawing right over here on this side, so you will be able to see me drawing throughout the workshop. So I'll be taking you through it step by step. And then even as Atticus and Rachel are posing and you are drawing at home, I'm going to be drawing right here. So you'll be able to track through it as I go through it. Now, you can draw with anything that you have handy. If you've got textures, if you've got pencils, if you've got crayons, doesn't matter. Draw with anything that you have. Now, we did put in the announcement leading up to this that if you do have charcoal, and particularly this type of charcoal called willow charcoal, that's a really, really good thing to use. And if you've got big paper, that's a great thing to use too. So the larger you can draw, the more that you can sort of free yourself up and give yourself room to move, that's outstanding. So I've got some nice big paper here so that you can clearly see what I'm drawing, but you can extend yourselves as well. All right, now before we get into the charcoal and we start doing our drawings, I want to talk to you just a little bit about life drawing, about what we're going to be doing here this evening, about this whole form and theater of life drawing, and then look at some drawings from the QAGOMA collection that illustrate this history of life drawing. In its most basic form, life drawing is people, bodies, coming together in a studio to do drawings of the body. That's all it is. It's a cooperative process between artists and models working together to make drawings. Now, that form has remained largely unchanged for a couple of hundred years. There have been changes, obviously, in the labor politics and the gender politics, the things that surround life drawing, but the form itself of observational drawing of the posing model in the studio hasn't changed that much. So I'm going to introduce you into some very, very basic skills tonight, which will really help you develop your life drawing. All right, now, before we get to that, let's look at some drawings to get yourselves warmed up. Now, I want to reiterate that we're not going to be drawing from these drawings. These are drawings in the QAGOMA collection. We're not going to be copying them or working from them, but we're just going to use them to start priming the pump, getting ourselves ready to do the drawings tonight. So we're going to switch over the screen right now, and you're going to see another screen pop up. And on that screen, you're going to see a drawing, a really, really beautiful drawing by Ian Fairweather. Now, this drawing by Ian Fairweather, Scottish-Australian artist. As you can see, this drawing done, you know, long time ago in 1920s, early 1920s. But Fairweather was an artist born in the 19th century, studied in that academic tradition, and you see that academic tradition in his drawings. Beautiful standing nude here, and a standing nude standing in a pose that we call contrapposto. Contrapposto pose, which we're going to demonstrate for you here in a couple of minutes and draw. But one of the things I'll draw your attention to in this work is his use of contour. The contour is the line that denotes the edge of the drawing. And you'll see how that contour line in some places is quite heavy and dense. And it's a strong contour and it's dark. And in other places, the contour fades out completely. And that sculpting of that contour edge of light and dark and thick and thin is the thing that we are going to explore tonight in this, this workshop. You'll also see there's a tiny bit of value brought in, a little bit of gray that indicates form around the knees, around the abdomen. And we will bring a tiny bit of value in ourselves too, but we're really going to focus on that contour. If we go to the next slide here by Margaret Salento, now, again, an artist who is trained very much in that academic tradition, really quick reclining nude drawing, again, heavy emphasis on the contour and on the construction of the body. So piecing the body together. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight, is how do you construct that body and create a legible body on your sheet of paper. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is very, very indicative. Another drawing, this one by Vincent Brown from the QAGOMA collection. And here you see an artist, even up until the 1940s, working very much in that academic tradition. So the single figure, the male nude, we're going to talk a lot about the male nude and the female nude over the course of the next hour together. Up until the 19th century, the male nude was the accepted form, the highest form of beauty and achievement one could hope for in sculpture and in drawing. And so you see here the classical male nude, but again, you see this very, very elegant, refined rendering of that nude, where all of the parts of the body, the musculature, the skeletal structure, the pose, all of those things are put together in a very, very elegant, sophisticated manner, and one that's immediately legible. Again, you can pick out all of the individual parts. Now, if we go on to the next slide, this is the artist that I really want to emphasize here with you this evening. This is Rupert Bunny. Many of you might be familiar with Rupert Bunny. He was one of the most successful Australian artists in the European scene going back to the 19th century. But the interesting thing about Bunny is he did study in the Academies of Europe. So he studied in one particular atelier, one particular studio in Paris with a history painter, probably the last great academic painter of the 19th century in France, named Jean-Paul Laurens. And that's where Bunny studied. He would have studied a very particular way of approaching life drawing, where you study anatomy, then you work from casts, plaster casts of statues and classical works of art, and eventually you work your way up to working from the live model. And ultimately what you're working towards is this very, very refined contour. Again, that line that denotes the edge. If we go to the next drawing here, you'll see that again, very, very simple, stark figure on a blank ground, blank background with that beautiful refined edge. And then this last drawing, which is the one that I'd like to plant in your minds as we go forward. Again, beautiful contour, contrapposto pose, which refers to the S curve of the body and the movement of the hips and the shoulders. But again, look at the contour. Look at the way Bunny moves the contour from thick to thin, from light to dark, in order to create a sense of tension and weight in the body. And that's really what we're going to emphasize here tonight. All right, let's pop it over to me, and then let's start drawing, y'all. Okay, now I'm going to take you through some very, very basic approaches to drawing, and something that I, in my day job, I run the drawing program at the Queensland College of Art at Griffith University. And when I teach students their life drawing, I always begin with one basic skill. And that basic skill is called sighting. And you've seen me rocking around here in front of the camera and speaking to you and holding this long bamboo stick. This is called a sighting stick. And a sighting stick is used for sighting the model when the model's posing before you and organizing the model so that you can organize it on your sheet of paper. So what I'd like everyone to do is grab a pencil, a pen, anything that can be your sighting stick. And what you want to get used to is holding that sighting stick in your non-dominant hand, while you hold your tool for drawing in your dominant hand. So if you've got your charcoal, I'm right-handed, I've got that in my right hand, and I've got my sighting stick in my left hand. And again, any sort of pencil, pen, anything like that will work as a sighting stick. And now I want to do a quick demonstration for you. So I'm going to have Atticus and I'm going to have Rachel stand up for us here on the stage. All right, and Rachel, let's give a posterior view, and Atticus is going to give an anterior view, and they're both going to adopt what's called a contrapposto pose. Contrapposto means you're shifting all of your weight onto one leg, and when you put that weight on one leg, your hips pop in that direction. So your hips pop up that way. If I shift to the other leg, my hips pop the other way. So you're shifting your weight from side to side. Now, what we do naturally is if we shift our weight to one side, we tend to drop the shoulder on that same side. So what you wind up is a counter pose. You wind up with a counter pose. The shoulders going in one direction, the hips going the other direction. So let's look now at Rachel and Atticus. So you see Rachel has all of her weight here on her left leg. So you can see right there that her hips move that direction at that angle. To counterbalance herself, she moves her shoulders in that direction. That creates an S curve through her entire body, all right? We see in Atticus the exact same thing. All of the weight is here on his left leg, which tilts his hips in that direction. Because his hips are tilting in that direction, he counterbalances by tilting his shoulders down, opposite, counter pose. And because of that, he creates this beautiful S curve in his body. That S curve is essential to getting the weight and balance of the body in life drawing. It's actually named after a Greek sculptor, classical Greek sculptor named Praxiteles, who did some of the first classical contrapposto sculptures. And it's actually called the Praxitelean curve, right? Or the S curve in the body. So now let's map it out with your sighting sticks. All right, again, sighting stick in your non-dominant hand. When you're using your sighting stick, you're sighting for three different things. One of the things you're sighting for is those angles. So I'm taking my sighting stick, I'm holding it at arm's length, I'm locking my elbow, and I'm actually tilting it to feel out those different angles in the body. I can even look at the angle of Atticus's leg coming down, and I can hold my sighting stick and I can find that angle. So I'm sighting for those different angles. That's number one. The second thing I'm sighting for is measurements and comparisons. So you've probably all seen the cliche of an artist holding out a thumb like that, right? What's happening there is the artist is sighting. And you can do that with your sighting stick as well. You can take your sighting stick and you can measure from the top of Atticus's head down to the bottom of his mask there, to his chin, and get a single measurement. You can then say, okay, what is the length of his body? It's 1 head, 2 heads, 3 heads, 4 heads. You can start to measure the proportions. You could also say, okay, I'm gonna measure the width of his shoulders across and compare that to the length of his thigh and see that they're going to be identical, right? So it's all about comparing and measuring. Now, when you sight, even those of you at home who are sighting on your computer screen here, keep your arm at arm's length, sight it out there, make those measurements, and you can start comparing. Now, one of the things you cannot do when you're sighting is I can't sight Atticus's head like that and then come over and draw his head exactly that size on my paper, right? It's a relative measurement. It's not a direct measurement from one to one. The third thing that we sight for are mapping lines. So for example, I can even sight a line that goes from the top of Atticus's head all the way down to his big toe. Even though that line doesn't exist in reality, I can sight that line, and on my paper, I can test to see, have I got the top of his head along that line with that big toe? On Rachel, I could look at the way she's standing and I can say, where are her heels relative to the center of her head a vertical axis. And I can drop a vertical line straight down and I can say, okay, well, this heel, her weight-bearing leg, should be directly underneath the center of her head. It's on a vertical axis. Therefore, if I move that heel left or right, I know I haven't plotted it correctly. I haven't put it correctly in space. So this academic life drawing is all about mapping and plotting the body in space to create a very legible and elegant rendering of the body. And that's what we're going to do. So let's begin. Do you guys need to shake it out for a second before we get into this? Yeah, there we go. All right. Let's take a minute and let's all do this together. Okay, think about the very first thing I said, which is that the body is organized around that S-curve. The thing that I always recommend that you do first is draw that S-curve. So I'm going to begin here with Rachel over here on this side, on the right side of my paper. And I'm seeing that S-curve, again, goes from the top of her head through her weight-bearing leg, which is here on her left hip, and then back down under her body, right under the center of her head. So I know the overall movement of her body is going out like that and back down underneath like that. An S-curve to her entire body, just like that. And that's always the first thing I recommend you do, is start with that line right there that organizes it. Same thing with Atticus. I'm looking at Atticus. His weight-bearing leg is on the left as well, except he's giving us an anterior pose, a pose at the front of his body. So we're coming from his head, and we're coming over to his weight-bearing leg, which is also on the inside, on that side, and then coming down to his foot underneath. So it seems very simple, and there's not a lot of information there, but that's always where you should begin. Find that overall movement of the body. Then the second thing that you want to start to bring in is that tilt. Where's that tilt of the shoulder? Where's that tilt of the hips? And so again, on Rachel, you can see it quite clearly right there and there. And on Atticus, you can see it quite clearly there and there. So then I can say for Rachel, the shoulders are tilting down that way, and the hips are tilting up that way. Same thing with Atticus, hips are tilting up that way, shoulders are tilting down that way. All right. So if you've done it correctly, at the very beginning of this drawing, you should have a very simple S-curve that just maps out the shoulders and the hips like that. All right. And that's it. Now, I'd like to point out something about the body, which will help you all get it in proportion on your page. And that is one of the most important points on the body that you can learn. And it's called anatomical center. It's the center of the body from top to bottom. And the anatomical center of the body is right in the pit of your groin. All right. On a male, it would be right at the root of the penis. On a female, it would be going right across the groin. So anatomical center is coming right across here, which means everything from there to the top of Atticus's head is equal to everything from there to the bottom of his feet. And I always encourage my students, even when they're first starting out, to even take their piece of paper and fold it in half and put a little crease in the center so they find that anatomical center. Because what most people do when they first start out drawing the body is they wind up with a big head, big torso, and little stubby legs at the bottom. So one of the things that you can do is you can find that center of your page, right? That center. So let's say the top of the head is there, the center of my paper is there, then I know the bottom of the feet have to be there. So that's the anatomical center. That's got to be where the groin is in the center. And you can see that the hips are up above that. So the hips are up here. The anatomical center is at the groin down here. For Atticus, the hips are up there. The anatomical center is down there. So that anatomical center right in the groin will help you locate the length of the legs and get it all organized. And then all you're going to do is start to fill out the basic forms. We work deductively from the general to the specific. So I'm looking at Rachel again, then I'm going to start to say, okay, this arm is hanging more or less straight down. The shoulders go up and the other arm is coming down like that. Her waist is up there, coming out to her, again, weight-bearing leg, coming down, back under her body, other hip there, down to her bent knee, and back down under her body to her feet there. The bottom of the buttocks is going to come down in that area, coming up. Okay, shoulders up to the neck and head. Okay. Okay. And that's it. Really, really quick and really loose. You want to lay out that body like that. Now we're going to build up more information, more detail as we go forward. But in your first steps, you're finding that overall S curve and then the angles of the shoulders and hips and that overall mass of the form. Same thing with Atticus now. Looking there, I see the shoulders are going down. This arm is wrapping around behind him. It's got the overall S curve going right down to his anatomical center there. This hip and leg is coming down and bearing his weight. The other leg is kicked out in that direction, just like that. That arm goes behind, that arm is out, and the hand is coming back down onto his hip, like that, and then his head is sitting up there, okay? So again, very, very quick, very loose to map that overall body. If it looks gestural, if it looks loose, you're doing perfectly. You're doing really, really well. And then what we'll do is we'll start to build some different, or some more information on top of that. Okay, y'all, excellent. You guys can shake it out. All right, nice. All right, now, I'm gonna have Atticus and Rachel turn around for us now and do slightly different poses. So Rachel, I'll have you face towards me like this direction, that's right. And then Atticus, I'll have you turn around and give us a posterior pose. All right, and we're gonna have them both hit a contrapposto, moving their bodies again. And now what I want you to do is go through that exact same exercise, start to finish, of laying out their entire body on that sheet of paper. And what I'm gonna do on mine is I'm just gonna wipe it back and work back over the surface of this again. So you can watch me do it, okay? And now let's all do this together this time, all right? So I'm looking over here at Atticus, and I'm getting the S curve that goes through his whole body, like that, down to his weight-bearing leg, there. Okay, I know his anatomical center is going to be coming right across the center there. His shoulders are tilting down that way. His hips are tilting the opposite direction that way. And then I can start to block in the rest of the information. And you can see I'm working very, very quickly, very loosely. I'm not worried about detail at all at this stage. Like that. And then the head, which is in that area there, all right? And getting him standing in space. Now your view from the camera will be slightly different from my view because I'm getting more of a profile view. And then if I come and I look at Rachel here, same thing. I'm getting the overall curve coming like that through her body. And I'm saying she's moving, her abdomen is moving forward, moving out. One leg is, the weight-bearing leg is in the back there. The non-weight-bearing leg is coming forward like that. Arm is wrapping down behind her body there to her shoulder. And then head moving forward in that area, okay? Really, really quick, really loose. You should be able to map out that entire figure in space in a rough drawing like that in under a minute. That's what you should be working towards. Now, you're not going to be able to get that all at once. I'm going to stay out of the way because I know you're looking at the models. You're not going to be able to get it that quickly all at once, but you want to keep working, keep practicing, discipline yourself and do it over and over and over again until you can get that overall map of the body where the proportions seem right in about a minute, 60 seconds or less. And you can always continue to cite. So you might say, okay, what exactly is the angle there of Atticus's leg? And I can cite the angle there and then check it in my drawing. I've got the angle like that. I'm citing the angle like that. Good, they match. I could look at Rachel and say, okay, what's the angle of her upper leg and lower leg that's bent? Cite those angles, check my drawing. How have I hit those angles? Pretty good. I can still continue to cite up and down, the vertical. I could say in Ben, if I come straight down from the center of his head all the way down, where does that meet the cleft of his buttocks? Where does it meet his heel? Where do those things fall in space? This whole process of life drawing and citing is a process of mapping that body out in space like that. All right, let's stop there. Thanks, y'all. Let's give Rachel and Atticus a little bit of a breather. And I'll have a little bit of a breather too. All right, I hope that went well. How'd everybody do so far on that, I wonder? I know you're going to share your drawings with us through the link that Shannon has shared with you too. All right, we're going to move on to the next drawing after you shake it out a little bit and take a little bit of a breather. For the next drawing, we're going to build it up. We're going to take a little bit longer and we're going to build it up and make it a little bit more sophisticated. So what we're going to do for the next drawing is we're actually going to start out much lighter with this mapping and sighting. And so start very, very lightly with your S-curve. Start very lightly by laying out all of your angles and axes. And eventually what we're going to do is build up the contour of the body, the exterior contour on top of that. The way the artists used to study to life drawing going into the 19th century, it was a process of initiation. So artists would begin by studying from other artists, studying casts, plaster casts of statues, studying pattern books, studying those kinds of things, other paintings and drawings. And then they would eventually work their way up where they had enough skill that they were allowed to draw from the live model. We do things very differently nowadays, where students will jump right in and start drawing from the live model and then work backwards to learning the anatomy, to learning all of the ideals, et cetera, et cetera. But it used to be that you had to step through those processes first. And you even had to go through a process of learning something called an écorché. An écorché, E-C-O-R-C-H-E, that is a French word. It's a body that's had all the skin peeled off. So students would even have to go, they'd have to look at Atticus sitting there, draw him out, and then draw him as if he had no flesh and show all of the muscle groups underneath. So there were all of these steps that students had to go through. But also, I should point out, in the 19th century, this was a highly regulated field. So the gender politics were not something to be envied. Female students were not admitted to the Royal Academy and the Beaux-Arts, et cetera, until late in the game, and life drawing classes were segregated. So all women had to study together with other women, men studied with other men. Only men were allowed to study the male nude. Women were not allowed to study the male nude, and et cetera, et cetera. These processes went on. There were all sorts of regulations. At the Royal Academy in London, you were not allowed to speak to the model. It had to be silent in the room. You had to have at least 5 meters of space between the model and the closest student. They even had classes where you had a person called a middle woman. That was actually what it was called, a middle woman. The middle woman was a kind of chaperone who would sit in the classroom in between the posing model and the students as a kind of puritanical bulwark to any sort of funny business that might be going on there. So you had all of these systems in place to regulate the life drawing encounter, because there was a sense that life drawing is always just a hair's breadth away from total depravity, right? And so it had to be very, very carefully controlled, and that sense of control bled over to the drawings. And the drawings had to be very ideal. They had to be very carefully controlled. They had to be very chaste, et cetera, right? So the values of the drawing are echoed in the values of the life drawing class and the life drawing studio, and those things reinforce each other. And again, as we go through this series, we're going to talk about the changing values of life drawing, and not just the changing values in terms of the regulation of life drawing, but the way the values change, the aesthetic values that come through in the drawings as well. All right, now, let's get on to our next drawing. Everybody's had a chance to rest. Let's get a fresh sheet of paper. And I'm going to take down this big one and get a fresh one here. There we go. All right. And now on this drawing, we're going to take a little bit longer, and we're going to do a little bit, whoops. We're going to take a little bit longer on this drawing, and we're going to build it in layers. So we're going to start very, very lightly by mapping the figure. And this time we're going to work our way up to putting some contour on top of that figure. Did my microphone go off? There we go. Can you still hear me, everybody? How are we doing? All good? Okay, I'm getting thumbs up, good. All right, stepped on my microphone cord. Sorry about that, y'all. All right, so this time, again, we're gonna start with that sighting, mapping out the whole body in space. Then we're gonna wipe that back. If you're working in pencil, just work very lightly. If you're working in willow charcoal, you're going to be able to wipe that back so you just see the ghost of it there. And then we're going to start to hang the contour, the shape of the body on top of that armature that you're going to build. So that's the way to think of it. We're going to do a kind of armature of the body, which is very general. We're going to get all of the position correct, and then we're going to work our way up to starting to define and delineate some of that contour. And then our final stage this evening, we're going to start to sculpt that contour line, that sculpted line, just like I showed you in the Rupert Bunny and the Fairweather, where you're seeing that thick, thin contrast as that line moves around the body and shows tension and shows weight and shows balance and shows friction and all of those different parts of a pose. All right, so let's get into it now. Let's go on. In this pose, we're going to do it then in a couple of different sections. We're going to begin with a very, very quick map. Then we're going to wipe that map back. We're going to refine it a little bit more, and then we're going to add contour. This whole process should take us about 10 minutes, maybe a tiny bit more than 10 minutes. And I want to try to leave us enough time that we can go through this a couple of times here this evening. All right, so let's begin at the beginning then with our sighting. Okay, and this time we're going to do one standing pose and one seated pose. So Atticus, I'll actually have you standing there on the little dais. Yep, and Rachel, I'll have you move there. Perfect. Okay, so we'll do one standing, one seated. They're going to get comfortable here. Art modeling is a very, very difficult job. I've worked with Atticus and Rachel many times before. They're both exceptional life models. Life modeling, I'll talk a little bit more about as we go through this whole series, but life modeling itself has changed dramatically over the last couple of 100 years. Up until the mid-19th century, you would not find really almost any female models in the academies. They were all male models. That has shifted entirely over the past 150 years, where you see almost exclusively female models in the academies, and it becomes more and more rare to find male models. But we'll talk again more about those histories and the specifics of them as we move forward. All right, so we've got these two lovely poses there, all right? So in Atticus, I see that everybody there, I'm looking at the screen, is getting a bit of a profile pose. When you're dealing with a profile, think about the curvature of the spine. Human beings have what we call a four-curve spine. You do not want to draw a lollipop stick with a basketball on top. That's no good. You have a curve here that moves this way. That's your C-spine. It then curves back around your rib cage. That's your T-spine right there. It curves again in your lower back, your lumbar, your L-spine, and finally hooks back around in your sacrum and coccyx. So you have that four-curve spine that moves like that through the body. And when you're getting a profile, you want to show that. You don't want to draw the body as though it's erect, all right? So you see that beautiful curve in Atticus's body. When you look at Rachel, leaning like she is, and sitting like she is, doing a seated pose, this is where your sighting comes in, all right? Think about the overall shape of her body. Overall, she's a triangular shape, and you can sight what's the angle from the top of Rachel's head right down to her foot there at the bottom. Then what's the angle from that foot back to her hand? These are those mapping lines I was talking about earlier. Line up there, and then back up to the top of her head. If you can get the angles of that triangle correct, you will be able to organize her entire body within that. So with Atticus, we've got the S curve. With Rachel, because she's doing a seated pose, we're working with a geometric shape, and we're going to organize her within that, okay? So let's start, and I'm not going to try to draw them both because I'm going to do this as a demonstration for you, so I'll focus just on drawing Atticus. Those of you at home, you may draw one or the other. If you're a little bit more experienced and you're a quicker drawer, draw them both, all right? But I'll leave that up to you. But you can watch me go through it, and I'll describe it with Atticus. Even if y'all are drawing Rachel, that's all right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look, again, using my sighting stick, always in my non-dominant hand. I'm holding that sighting stick and looking at the overall movement, and I can see that that curve of his body overall moves through like that, right? So I'm starting with that line. For those of you who are drawing Rachel again, start with that triangle that shows the overall shape of her body in space, all right? Now, once I've got that, I'm gonna start to organize where the shoulders are coming across. I'm gonna sight the angle. The shoulders are dropping slightly from me this direction, like that. So I need to make sure I drop them. The hips, I'm sighting again. Hips are moving up in the other direction, like that. And then the weight-bearing leg is coming, or his non-weight bearing leg, sorry, is coming down that way. His weight bearing leg is going back behind him and crossing over there. So I'm getting that kind of a movement. And then I'm getting the curve in his back and his arm, which wraps around his hip, his other arm, which is bent at the elbow. Y'all might not be able to see that. And then his C-spine up into his head there. All right, so there's the overall layout. And again, I know you're working on this at home. You should be working on doing that in about a minute, all right? It's not gonna look like much. If it looks like a really glorious stick figure, you're doing brilliantly. And I will try to stop walking in front of y'all as you draw. Okay, now, I'm gonna slow walk it now so everybody can get caught up, get that overall map. Once you've got that overall map there on your sheet of paper, what I'm gonna do now with just my already blackened charcoal hand is I'm just gonna rub over the entire thing and wipe it back. Now, if you're thinking, why wouldn't I use a kneaded eraser or something else for that? You absolutely could, but with willow charcoal, it's not necessary. Willow charcoal is just a piece of willow that's been charred in an oven. It's had all the water and oxygen removed, so all that's left is carbon. So it's a nice, soft, beautiful thing that you can just rub right back, but you'll still be able to see your ghost of your armature there. All right, can you still see that in the video there on the screen? Yeah, okay, I'm getting thumbs up, beautiful. All right, now, once you have that, now you're ready to start adding some detail, right? And by detail, I mean that contour, the shape of that contour. Now, you want to come in and continue to sight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double check the angle of Atticus's arm and check it against my drawing. I'm slightly off. So I've turned it slightly clockwise. I need to turn it slightly counterclockwise. So I'm going to make a little adjustment there to the angle of the arm. I'm going to check the angle of his forearm. My angle of forearm is right on the money. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to check the angle of his thorax. So the angle coming down his rib cage here and going that way. And it should be coming in like that. So I'm pretty good there too. That's going to come in before it curves back over there. And then the angle of his hips. All right, so I'm pretty good with all of my mapping that I have there. Now I can start blocking in the larger forms. Now this is where sighting becomes important for you again. For those of you who are drawing Rachel, sight out the size of her head from the top of her head to the bottom of her mask, and then see how many heads is it down to the bottom of her thigh. Is it 1, 2, 3? Is it 2.5? How many heads? And then measure it out on your drawing and see if you've got that size and that distance correct. So again, you're measuring and comparing that way. And you can do that for the length of her arm compared to the length of her thigh, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you who are doing Atticus, you could do the same thing. You might take the length of this arm from elbow to shoulder, sight that, and compare that to his thigh. So I'm going to sight it with my arm stretched, bang, from shoulder to elbow, compare that to his thigh. It goes exactly from his dancer's belt to his knee. So I know if that's the length of the arm from shoulder to elbow, that's got to be the length of that thigh from his briefs there down to his knee. And that length should match that length. All right, and I'm a little too long right there. That needs to be dropped a bit. So I can measure again, bang, I'm right on. All right, so sighting is about measuring and comparing, finding those angles and axes and putting it together. So now you should be taking about another 3 or 4 minutes and starting to mass in that form with your sighting. So now I'm taking another couple of minutes and I'm going to start massing in. Okay, there's the mass of the arm, there to the forearm, to the wrist, there. It's coming up to his chest. He's got his back shoulder there. Okay, coming around like that. Then tilting down. His waist is up there. Coming down his thigh to his leg. You can see I'm keeping it really quick and loose at this stage. And then that back leg, which pops out like that. all the way down to his foot at the bottom. There we go. And then I'm gonna mass in, there's his neck, up to his mask. A mask gives you a nice graphic thing that you can grab onto and draw up into his head and to his cranium, okay? There we go. Now, one of the things which I can check now is my overall proportions to the anatomical center. So again, I know from the top of the head to the anatomical center, which is not my whole stick, it's about there, should be about the same distance from the anatomical center down to the feet. And I'm pretty close. I've maybe made his foot a little bit too long, but I don't mind slightly exaggerating the length of the leg there because of the pose that he's taking. All right, so in another 3 minutes or so, you should be massing in that body, okay? There we go. Nice, a little bit more. He actually needs a little bit more hips, like that. A little bit more bulk to the leg too. There we go. And all the way down to the foot, okay? Now, for those of you that are drawing Rachel, as you start to put her together and you start to think about the bulk of that arm, think about, again, sighting, comparing the arm to the leg. How wide is the arm versus the width of that leg, right? Again, you can do very simple measurements. Also, you can measure things that aren't there. You can measure the distance from her hand to her knee, right? And then compare that distance, for example, to the length of her forearm. So you're measuring and comparing. For those of you who are standing in front of Atticus, I apologize. You're constantly measuring and comparing there, and then mapping it out on your drawing and looking back at your drawing and comparing it to what you're seeing on your drawing and whether you've got it all in space. Again, your drawing, and hopefully you can see this in my drawing, should still have evidence of that curve. If you're drawing a standing pose like that, you should still see that praxitilean curve going all the way through the whole thing. For the seated pose, you should still see that evidence of the triangle, that very first movement, geometric movement that you put in, which organizes the entire body. All right, I'm gonna give everybody another minute to finish up on your massing exercise right now. I hope that's going well. I will have a sip of coffee. Got this new headset for these workshops here. I was telling the team earlier, I'm going to try to start this whole sort of call center chic thing going on. I don't know if it's working out there or not. Okay. All right. Now, you've got that. Now, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did a minute ago again. I'm going to rub it back again, right? Because this is still all my massing and finding information that I have here. Now, if you do have a kneaded eraser or something like that, you can use it. But again, my hand's getting a little grimy, but I'm going to do the same thing again, where I'm just going to rub it all back there on my sheet of paper, okay? And then we're going to go into the final 3 minutes or so on this drawing, okay? So I'm rubbing that all back. Those of you who are massing it up in pencil, you should still be working very light on your surface, all right? So now I can just see that ghost. And now we'll go into the final couple of minutes. What I want to do now is go and emphasize what we talked about with the Ian Fairweather and Rupert Bunny at the beginning. Now try to find the contour. But what you don't want to do is just enclose the entire body in a monoline. It'll flatten it out and make it very dead. You want to try to find a dynamic line that indicates the weight. So where there's tension, where there's weight, give the line some weight. Where it's loose and it's not in tension, let the line go loose, right? So you're letting those graphic qualities of the line define the experience of the body in space. So for example, I'm looking at the weight-bearing leg here. Let me get out of the way so y'all can see that. I'm looking at the weight-bearing leg here, and I might come in now and really pop a strong line that goes back like that. And I might really emphasize the line that goes that way. So I'm starting to pull out and create some tension there. The other leg, the way I might be looser on, but then as I come down his thigh, he's really tensing his knee. So I might really start to bring in and show a lot of tension in that knee by bringing some nice dark lines, but then loosen again as I go down, all right? So what I'm doing is being really selective That's the key word here. I always say the key to drawing is tension and attention. You've got to create tension in the drawing, but you've got to show your own selective attention. What's important to you and what are the decisions that you're making? So I'm now going to say his arm is not really tensed at all. So I'm going to keep that really loose like that. I'm going to use a sort of noodly contour line to get really loose, but then his other shoulder is really tense again. So I'm going to go a harder line, a sharper line that shows more of that tension and comes in like that. Okay. So I'm being really selective now in where I put those heavy lines and where I put those softer, thinner lines. And I'm just going to keep working around the whole body now, showing those different qualities of contour and tension. All right. And I would do that whole process again for about another 3 minutes. Okay. And we'll give, and then we will give Atticus and Rachel a break. How are y'all holding up? Nice. All right. I said to Atticus and Rachel, and when you look at images of 19th century life drawing studios, there was always a bottle of wine on the dais. So I promised them I would have a bottle of wine for them on the dais. Universities frown on that. Okay, here we go. There we go. Nice, just get a little indication of the foot there. And I'm not even gonna bring too much attention to the foot that's in the back at all. Okay, and I could keep going, but I will just step away from that so you can see a little bit of what I've done there and then start looking at your own. Now, the other thing that I would do at this stage is I would come back in and I would start carving back into those lines, working what's called subtractively, which means taking an eraser, rubber, and then coming back in and actually sculpting those lines. So as you keep drawing, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take now a vinyl eraser, a plastic eraser, and I would come in and now I'd really start to work and say, okay, I wanna make that a very, very thin line right there. So I'm gonna sculpt back into it. I wanna tension right there where it's going back there into his glute. So I'm gonna sculpt a little bit out there and a little bit there in his thorax and pull a little bit there. So I'm working now what's called subtractively. I'm subtracting that charcoal from the surface. And I could work around this entire drawing and do that with all the lines. So when I'm talk about sculpting the lines, I'm talking about literally sculpting, right? You're adding and subtracting by pushing and pulling against those lines. Okay, and I want to get that COVID mask in there really, really well. Let's get that. There we go, nice. Bang, okay, I gotta give a little indication of your eye there too, I guess, Atticus there. Perfect, all right. Whew. Everybody take a deep breath. All right, Atticus and Rachel, thank you very much. All right, now, when you're working with a life model, we go in a kind of a rhythm, right? One of the big parts of life drawing is duration. So there's a duration to the pose, there's a rhythm to the pose, short pose, long pose, break for the model shakes it out, you take a break, work back, and there's a kind of rhythm, and that rhythm is important because this drawing is about the body, right? It is the body, and your body has rhythms, and those rhythms will come through in the drawing. Academic life drawings of the 19th century are a little bit deceptive because the majority of drawing that was done on those academic studies was done without the model. So the model would come in, the students would set up the basic framework of the pose and some of the details of the folds of the flesh, and the model would leave, and the students would then spend another 20, 30 hours on that drawing before the model would come back again, and they would reference the model, and the model would leave, and the students would work on that drawing again. And it's because those drawings were put together according to, again, a set of ideals based on classical statues, based on patterns, based on anatomy, based on the history of art. So it wasn't what we think of today, where a drawing is about the idiosyncrasies of a particular posing model. It was really a kind of collection of a lot of different ideas of the model. And that's something, when you look at 19th century drawings, you have to understand those academies, they were called, those academic life drawings were done according to those very, very specific systems of drawing. Very different than the way we work today in post-war drawing, which is much more immediately responding to the drawing. And when the model goes, the drawing is over, right? It's a much more event-driven way or theatrical way of looking at life drawing. All right, how are y'all doing? Good, 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 okay. All right, everybody out there, you ready to do it again? All right, hopefully you've got that now. You know the system that we're gonna go through, but let's review it one more time, all right? Step one, You're looking, you know, I always used to tell my students, don't even draw for the first 2 minutes, just look, you know, look with your sighting stick, look, map, visualize, right? You're figuring it out, you're measuring and comparing and getting that idea in your mind of the pose. Then when you start drawing, you're working deductively from the general to the specific. The way that people, oftentimes kids draw and people who don't have a lot of experience drawing is they work inductively. They start with tiny little details and then piece those details together into a drawing. But that's not going to work if you want to organize it in this academic way. So you work from the general to the specific. So again, you're sighting, then we're going to do a quick, within 1 minute, layout of the entire body. Then wipe that back, then start to mass out, right? The muscle and the flesh. And then for about 3 minutes, wipe that back, and then start to be really selective with the attention that you're giving and the contours that you draw, all right? So that entire process, start to finish, should take you about 7 minutes, right? A minute to lay it out, about 3 minutes to mass it out, and about 3 minutes to lay in some detail. And when it comes to practicing life drawing and getting better at life drawing after this workshop tonight, give yourself those times. You know, in old life drawing studios, I don't have one, or I would have it here for you. They would use literally an hourglass. They had, you know, a sand hourglass, which they would turn over on the stand, and that's what they used as a timer. Now we use electric timers, but that hourglass, I always love that in old life drawing studios, because if you were a student, you could actually see the time running out as you were working. So I can imagine the kind of stress and the kind of physicality of that time passing through the hourglass. Okay, so we're gonna go 1 minute layout, wipe it back. 3 minutes to mass it in, wipe it back. 3 minutes to refine that contour. All right, everybody got it? Okay, again, we're gonna have Atticus and Rachel take a pose. Whether or not you wanna draw both of them is up to you. Again, if you feel quick, you've done this before, do them both. If you think I really wanna focus, pick one or the other. Okay, so Atticus, let's have you do a seated pose this time, and Rachel, let's have you do a standing pose. Okay. All right, and I'm gonna get a fresh sheet of paper. All right, there we go. All right, now let's take this first minute and just be looking, be studying it, thinking about the overall movement of their body and where that tension and that S curve sort of belongs there in the drawing, okay? Everybody start there. Okay. All right. Now, once you've got that laid out, okay, and you've got it visualized, now you're ready to start that quick drawing, okay? And I'm gonna do Rachel again here as a standing figure. So I'm looking, thinking that overall movement of her body and that S curve, and I'm gonna begin there. Okay, and I'll try to stay out of the way, but still be able to see Rachel so you can see me go through this process. All right, and just keep drawing, y'all. Don't wait for me to say it. Just keep doing it. Just draw, let it fly. All right, now as we do this drawing, I did very intentionally have Rachel and Atticus wear COVID masks, face masks tonight, not only because it's impossible for them to social distance while they're doing a tandem pose, and that's what we call it when we have two models posing together, tandem posing, but also because masking was one of the ways that life drawing was regulated in the 19th century. In fact, it was a way of censoring the model. So models would be posing nude, but to protect their virtue and the virtue of the students, this especially happened in America, but also in Victorian Britain, they would wear black masks across their entire face. So if you can imagine, you'd have a nude model posing, but with a black mask. And that was a way to try to guarantee that nothing was happening that shouldn't be happening in the life drawing room. So we thought it was a nice way both to comment on the history of life drawing, but also to be safe in our contemporary world. Okay, and it looks great. I love masking. Okay, so I've got the overall layout again. Her head is moving back that direction. All right, so there you have, again, in your first minute, the layout. Wipe it back. If you're doing Atticus seated on the stage, again, this time, think about the overall triangle of that seated pose. From the top of the head, through the buttock, back down to the foot, back up to the head. Think about that overall geometric shape and mapping out, citing that geometric shape in space. All right, now I'm moving on into my, I know I have less than 3 minutes now, but now I'm gonna start massing. And because Rachel's also wearing that brilliant prosthetic, which was cast from her own body, I have that line as a point of articulation, coming around there, coming to center line. Okay, and that's what you can see the way I'm just massing it up now. I'm not worrying about detail. I'm just checking all of my angles, making sure that I've got it all in space correctly. Hopefully I'm staying out of y'all's way enough so that you can see what I'm doing too. Although I'm sure you're focused on Rachel and Atticus and not on me. Okay, keep going now. Your 3 minutes is almost up. Keep drawing, I'll step away so you can see the way that my drawing is mimicking the overall shape of her drawing. All right. And then in just a minute, we're gonna stop, we're gonna wipe back again, and then we're gonna start to add that contour over the top of it, all right? As you're working again, don't worry about details. When it comes to things like fingers and toes, worry about the overall mass, the overall shape. When it comes to hair, don't worry about drawing spaghetti on the head. It'll look terrible. Think of it as if it were sculpted out of marble. Think about the overall shape there of the hair in the head. Don't try to draw individual strands of hair. There's way too many and you don't have enough time. All right, so keep it simple, keep it general, and then we'll work to the specific. All right, now's the time to wipe back again. All right, so you should now have the entire body massed in. So again, I'm gonna wipe back again. And if you're working in pencil, now is the time to get really dark. If you're feeling really confident and you have some ink handy, you could even come, if you've been working in pencil or charcoal, and do this final contour like Rupert Bunny did in ink over the surface. All right, so now I'm gonna come back in and now I'm gonna be really, really selective in what I draw. So now I'm thinking, you can see I'm slowing down now, thinking about the shapes, being really specific, like the shape of the breast, the shape of the shoulder, down to the arm, and then I want to get all of the tension when I get down to that leg, which is the weight-bearing leg. Okay, so now I'm coming down to that weight-bearing leg. I'm going to do a really sharp, hard line, catch that thigh right down to the knee, really articulate that knee too, which is bearing all of her weight, and down into her lower leg, her shin, and all the way down to her foot. Okay, just sitting there in space. All right. All right. Bang. And then her other foot, her other leg, I'm going to keep. It's not her weight-bearing leg, so I'm going to be much looser. Be much freer with that leg coming back in space and not putting nearly as much tension or emphasis on that because that's not her weight-bearing leg, okay? All right, so that's it. You're just starting to build up that contour and get more information in. And again, should be quick, should be loose. You've got about another minute, one more minute. Nope, I gotta do your eyes too, Rachel, sorry. All right. All right, let's bring that home, y'all. Quick and loose. All right, a few more seconds. And we're out. Thank you, y'all. All right, brilliant. Okay, we are gonna do it one more time. All right, for our last pose of the night. I can't believe it's 8:05 already. The time just flies right by. I wish I had 3 hours with y'all. I mean, even that wouldn't be enough. All right, so what I want to emphasize now, before we go into the final drawing, is what the value of academic life drawing is. As I said at the beginning, the value of academic life drawing is legibility, right? The whole idea is that you're creating a very legible body where you can pick out all of the different forms. You can clearly see muscles, you can see where bony structures are, where you can see where the joints and junctures are in the body, and it sits in space in an elegant and natural way. Now, I don't mean to imply at all that that's the only way to approach life drawing. Of course it's not, and those aren't the only values in life drawing. There are a lot of different ways to approach life drawing and beautiful drawings that come out of approaching the body in different ways. But this is one system, and it is still a system which is taught. It's this atelier model of learning is still taught at art schools all over the world, both in academies and outside in private art schools. You know, in the time period that we're talking about in the 19th century, there was a big difference between Britain and France, because Britain, the art schools were subsidized by the government, and they were associated with the government. They were very heavily regulated. In France and Paris, there were private ateliers, private studios that tended to be a lot more liberal and progressive in the way that they went about things. So even the way life drawing happened in the 19th century is not consistent from country to country. And of course, in America, where I'm from, and in Australia here, we really followed the British model much more than we did the French model, although you do get artists who did, like Rupert Bunny, who went and studied in France in the ateliers and learned that method. All right, let's go over to your final sheet of paper for tonight. Let's see, is this my final sheet of paper? It is. Hey, I got just the right number of pages for tonight. All right, and now let's go on to this last drawing, okay? And now for this last drawing, we're gonna do a standing pose again. So we're gonna have both Rachel and Atticus take a standing pose for you. So you can really practice that S-curve, mapping out the shoulders and hips in those different angles, doing some sighting. And then if you're feeling really, really confident, if you haven't done it yet, you can draw both of them. Do a drawing that includes both of them in one drawing. We're gonna try to knock out this whole thing in about 7 or 8 minutes. Again, when I'm done, then I'm gonna throw it back to Shannon and the QAGOMA team, who are gonna talk to you a little bit about what's gonna happen next, and also about the sharing your drawings. It was wonderful. The series that we did, the draw along series that we did in June, so many people shared their drawings. So many people tagged us in social media. People were sharing their drawings with me personally too, and sending them into QAGOMA, and it was absolutely brilliant. And we want to keep that going. Sharing what you're doing is really important when we do these sessions. All right, so let's get into the final one. Let's do a final contrapposto. Let's actually switch. Let's have Rachel, let's have you on that side. And yeah, Atticus will have you on that side. And Rachel, I'll have you move all the way over to that stage. Yep, perfect. And let's give, yeah, just a really strong Venus de Milo contrapposto, you know, really popping a hip. There you go. Beautiful. All right. Oh, y'all are lucky to have this. We've got the Rodin classic here, and we've got the Venus de Milo classic over there. All right, so take one, take the other, take both, but we're gonna go again about 7 or 8 minutes, and we're gonna go step it through. So I'll do it right here. I'll try not to stand in front of my drawing too much, and I'll do it here. You can watch me do it, and I'll call out the time as we go through it. All right, so let's begin. Okay, sighting it out. And I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna draw Rachel over there so you can clearly see what I'm doing, and I can clearly see her, and I want to stand in front to see Atticus. All right, again, you could do one or both. And let's begin. Start with that S-curve, right? With Atticus, the S-curve is gonna go that way. With Rachel, it's gonna go the other way, because his load-bearing hip is on the left, her load-bearing hip is on the right. So they're moving in different directions, all right? So I'm gonna go with Rachel, and hers is on her right, our left. So I'm gonna lay that out. Finding the angles, keep sighting it to check it. All right, that was about a minute. Have you got it? Now wipe it back. You've got that overall map in your S-curve. For those of you working in pencil, you've got it nice and light. Those of you working in charcoal, you've wiped it back. Okay, and now we're ready to start massing. Another 3 minutes. I've been drawing like this now for 30 years. I've been teaching it for 25 years, and I still cite every time I draw. It's not something that you grow out of. It's a habit, a good drawing habit that you just establish and you stick with. All right, you're almost there, y'all. Another few seconds on your massing. Okay. All right, how's everybody doing? All right, now wipe it back, and we're gonna go on to our final stage. All right, let's do it again. Oh yeah, we're right on time, okay? So then wipe it back again. Should still be able to see that beautiful armature. That'll give you some value for those of you who have been doing this a little bit more, who feel confident with value. You can get in there into that once you've wiped it back, and again, carve it back up with your erasers. Okay, wipe it back. Final 3 minutes, y'all. And in this final 3 minutes now, be really selective again and decide where do you want to bring the attention in this drawing. Okay. For me, I'm getting a lot of tension in Rachel's neck. Here, let me move out of the way again. Coming down through her shoulder there, which is popping, creating that beautiful curve. So I'm going to emphasize that. And then that movement down. All right, another couple of minutes, y'all. Not too much time. All right, how's it going, y'all? Another minute. Keep it quick, keep it loose. Final minute. Right? And for those of you who have been prone to cutting off hands and feet or heads, always just anchor the body. You don't need a lot of information. So if you're not too busy with your own drawing, you'll see how I come right down here to Rachel's foot there, her load-bearing foot, and I'm just gonna bring a little bit of weight into that bottom of the drawing. I don't need a lot of detail. I don't need to draw toes. I don't need to do any of that. I just need to give a sense of that weight coming down at the bottom. And that's it, just to anchor that body in space. All right, final few seconds, y'all. And we're out. All right, it is customary at the end of a life drawing class to thank the models with a round of applause, and we will hear you all over Brisbane. Bravo. Well done, Atticus and Rachel, brilliant. And don't worry, you will get to see more of Atticus and Rachel. We did some fairly conventional classical poses today. For the next session that's coming up next week, when we go to sudden bodies and we talk about movement and gesture and the way that movement and gesture are incorporated into the life drawing system, primarily through what's called gesture drawing, although we're going to really expand that notion of gesture drawing from the way it's usually taught and practiced in life drawing groups and classes. And we'll have Rachel and Atticus back again next week. We're going to do some much more dynamic poses and quite a lot of movement for you. So at Sudden Bodies next week, as part of Draw Along again, I hope you will all come back. I hope you can rejoin us here in my studio. I cannot wait to see the drawings that you've done this week. Thank you so much, y'all, and I'll see you next week. All right, bye-bye.